Hi, and welcome to this tutorial on how to modify lines and add colours and patterns to a fashion sketch using Adobe Illustrator. So what we have is this t-shirt, and what we're going to do first is we're going to change the illustration to make it this long sleeve t-shirt. Now, before we get into this, there's a few tools we need to learn. First one is the pen tool. Right, now the pen tool here looks like a fountain pen nib. And what I'm just going to do is in a new layer, and I'm actually just going to make sure I only have a stroke selected. So what I've done here is I clicked on my fill and I've turned my fill to none, and my stroke is just a black line. The pen tool works quite simply. Your first click is just a click, and then you get this guideline to work with. Your second click creates the path. And if I were to do this, I will get a continual line. Ultimately, I can either complete the shape just by pressing the Enter key or the Return key, which will allow the shape to complete, or I can go back to the point where I started. When I go back to the point where I started, I get a little circle which indicates that the shape will now be a complete shape. So I'll just press delete to get rid of that. Now with the pen tool, the first click should always be just a click. If you want just a straight line, all you need to do is click. However, if you want to have a curve, then you click and drag in the direction you're going to go. This does take some getting used to initially, but will allow you to create interesting shapes. Now, what you see here at the moment, these points are called anchor points, and they occur everywhere where I've done a curve or I've done a corner. I can delete any single one of these points by going up to my pen tool and holding the options and clicking on the delete anchor point tool. This will allow me to remove any points that I want to change. So there we go. I now have this more simple shapes, right? If I were to select the anchor point tool, I could adjust any single one of my anchor points, right? I could also click on the direct selection tool to move any individual anchor point that I wanted to change. So if I wanted to create a more curved object here, I can go again to my anchor point tool and I can make an adjustment there. I can click and control individual anchor points. I can click and control any of these individual Bezier curve points just by clicking on the handle and adjusting them to how I want. Just remove that. If I were to draw a shape and for some reason not complete it, not finish it, then I can still join these 2 points together. First of all, I go onto my direct selection tool and I can click and drag over that point there, and this gives me, as you can see, that anchor point is now selected. However, these lines here, these points here, are unselected. If I hold the Shift key and click on that anchor point, I now have the 2 points selected, and I can either right click and go to join, or I could go to object, path, and join. Same method. Or I could press Control or Command J, and now the object is completed. A similar tool to the pen tool, though not to be mistaken with it, is using the curvature tool, right? The curvature tool works slightly different in that the first click gives you the point where you start with, and the second point does a line between the 2 points but starts to put in the curve for you, right? As I say, it does work in exactly the same way as the other points, but it helps you create more of a natural curve shape rather than you having to worry about how you've got potentially anchor points in the wrong position. So that is how you could create a simple curve. Now let's return to our artwork. Using those techniques, we're now going to attempt to change the sleeves so that they are now longer sleeves. So we're going to amend this artwork. So first of all, I will take this image, this artwork here, and I will go to Object and I will ungroup it so that I'm working with the various elements. So here I've got this sleeve. I'm going to select these pieces of the sleeve. I'm just going to move it out the way for the time being. So using my pen tool, initially, I am going to just turn off the fill again, though I add this back, and I will zoom in on my artwork, and I will create the sleeve for my brush. Now I can do this by manually putting in my sleeve here, and I'm just going to go across this point there and then back up the arm and so on and so forth, going back to the place where I began, which gives me my sleeve. Right, don't worry about these joins and imperfections for the moment. I would suggest that your best bet is, if you make a mistake with the artwork you're trying to create, just keep going, because of course you can edit it after the fact. So as we demonstrated before, I could move my individual anchor points and put elements in, right? So I can tweak and change all the various anchor points on my artwork, or I can even go as far as going to my add anchor point tool, and I can add some more anchor points to allow me to create some of the finer details. So maybe I want to, bring in, I need to zoom in, excuse me, bring in some, crease elements, say, for argument's sake, within the artwork there. Now, as it stands with my sleeve shape there, I need to bring in my fill color. So I'll just go to my eyedropper tool and select that. So that is now filled in. And then with my new and improved sleeve, right, I could leave it there, but it doesn't look all that good and as realistic as my last short sleeve. So I need to throw in a few more elements. So first thing I will do is I will add another line. I'll again turn my fill off, and I'll just add another line that gives me the end of my cuff there. And again, I will just go and adjust that individual anchor point there. So I've got there's my cuff. Control minus or Command minus and plus to zoom out. Now, what I'm going to do first is this stitching here. I'm going to add some stitching to the bottom of the cuff before I move on with some other effects. So in order to just do this, I'm going to add this curve. In fact, I'm not going to use the pen tool to do it. I'm actually going to add it with the curvature tool. There we go. So there I have my curves for my stitching there. I will just copy and paste it so that I have two of the same. Right? In order to get this stitching effect here, I just need to turn this stroke into a dashed line. Now I do this by going to my properties panel. Let me just remove this color swatch. And here within stroke, I can change the effects and the images of my stroke simply by clicking on the dash line button. Now, as it stands, this dash line is way too big with a spacing of 12 points. So if I go to my stitching here, you'll see that I have it at 1.5 with a gap of 1.5. So if I just go and amend this, so 1.5 for the stitch, 1.5 for the gap, and there I have my stitching. Another option is, if I've already done this on the artwork somewhere else, I can click on my line and just go to my eyedropper tool and make a selection, and it will automatically switch over to the same stitching type. Now you'll see here that that stitching is slightly thicker because when I've drawn this line, it's given me a bigger point size than the point size that I created this with. So it's always a good idea to maybe just double check your artwork that you are working with the same stroke widths and those type of things. So there we go. I now have my long sleeve in place. I'm just gonna take that, bring that out a bit. Right now, again, for the moment, this doesn't look all that interesting and all that realistic because I need to add some of these draping effects that I've got here. So these are done using the paintbrush tool. The paintbrush tool is just nice and simple. It works like a brush. I just draw in my curves. So I need to work with where the creases within the sleeve might be. So there'd be some natural creases by the elbow, for instance, you know, or just creases where the garment would curve around. So I can just throw some of these creases in to indicate how the fabric might, might work and fold naturally along with the body. So that's now starting to look a bit more interesting, right? The other thing I may want to do, well, in fact, I do want to do, is I would like to add a pocket. Now, we've used the pen tool before to create straight lines. We've gone through this. So to add a pocket can simply be done by clicking, and to make sure your line is perfectly straight and horizontal, we can hold the Shift key to do it. So if I hold Shift, that will be a perfect line. Unfortunately, what I have just done is I have not changed my brush settings, as you can see here. So I'm getting this brush effect, but I'm just going to continue for the moment, creating my pocket, and as you'll see here, the guides give me where various areas intersect, and I shall make my pocket. Now, there is my pocket shape, but the paintbrush tool that I was using to get this effect has changed the brush pattern. So I just need to go over here to change my stroke back to its basic line, and then I have my stitching back to where it should be. I also need to adjust this individual anchor point because I don't think I intersected that properly. So there is my pocket, but I would like to have this stitching within my pocket. So let me just make this pocket a bit bigger for the moment. So in order to do this, I will just duplicate this pocket by going to Edit and Copy, and Edit and Paste in place, and then it's in the exact same position. And I will hold the Alt or Option key, depending on if you're on a PC or a Mac, and the Shift key, and I will just scale down that there to resize my pocket. Click on my eyedropper tool, click to my stitching, and then I have my stitching within my pocket. So that has now, as a technique, allowed me to replace my sleeves, right? Add in some draping effect. I've used the pen tool and the curvature tool, and I've also used the stroke tools to get a dashed line. To replace the sleeve on the other arm, there's no need to redraw it. I could just go to select all of the elements. I could go to Edit and Copy and Edit and Paste, so I have a second arm. And then going over here to the Rotate tool, the Reflect tool here will allow me, if I hold the Shift key, if I click and drag to the left, I get the sleeve mirror imaged over, and I will just take those elements of the sleeve over there, and I can bring my new sleeve and add it in place on the other side. So that's how we can use the pen tools and the paintbrush tools to create new elements for our clothing. So now that we have our redesigned artwork for our t-shirt, what we're going to do is we're going to add a pattern and recolor some parts of it, so we end up with something like this. So first of all, we need to get our pattern swatch. So here is some artwork I've created, so I'm just going to copy and paste this. So I'll select all of it and I'll go Edit and Copy, and then in a new layer here I'll just paste it in. So there we go. Now, two ways I can create my patterns, right? One is I can select all of the artwork, and in my swatches panel I can just drag it in, and that will create me a new pattern swatch. I already have one, so I'm just going to undo that. Another option is I could have everything selected and go to Windows and Pattern Options, and in the menu options here I can go Make New Pattern, right? So when I've made a new pattern this way via the pattern options, I get the swatch visible to me, and I can alter a lot of the settings here. So for instance, I could, you know, change the grid of how it's patterned. It could be a 5x5 grid, or it could just be, you know, the individual thing on its own. So I've got this set to 3x3. I can scale the size of the artwork, you know, so I could scale it down. So I'll just set this to 2 inches by 2 inches, and that would tile that. But as you can see, this has got the spacing in between, so you know, I could adjust my spacing within the artwork. So I'll just, I don't know, I'll set that to -5, like -5, and you can see how I get different pattern settings to toy with, but I'm not going to mess with any of those because we need to get on with our tutorial. So first of all, how can we change some of our elements? So first of all, what I want to do is I want to add this pattern to this artwork. So what I'm going to do first and foremost is I'm going to do it one of a couple of ways. So first of all, I'm going to click on the direct selection tool. I'm going to select the body of this top. Now, the reason why I've done it this way is because what I can do is I can go to the swatches and I can just click on the pattern, and then it's changed it there. So that's had that effect. Another option entirely is I could drag my swatch and just drop it on the bit that I want to change, and then that's changed, right? With another option that I could do is I'll copy and click and drag over, I'll select the sleeve, and then I'll select that, and I'll apply the swatch to both areas there, because you can see the patterns gone through to the sleeve there, because I want it to be consistent. Now that's how I can bring in my pattern swatch to this, but in terms of the artwork, it's not quite right. It's not the way I want it yet, because I want the pattern itself to be a bit smaller. So in order to do this, first of all, just to work with this a bit better and so I don't make any other mistakes, I'm going to go to Object and I'm going to ungroup this artwork, and I'm going to keep ungrouping it until I can't ungroup it anymore. Right, so there it is. So now I can select these. So I'll select this one and I'll go back to what I did before in the other video. I go to Select, Same, and with the same fill color, and that's selected everything with the same fill color, except lesson I learnt before is I need to lock this object so that I'm not selecting anything that I don't want. So Select, Same, Fill Color. So that's all of these things here. And to change the pattern, I'm going to right click with my mouse and I'm going to go to Transform and Scale. Now this is based on settings that I've had from a previous thing, so let me just put this back. So what I want to do is I want to scale this by 50%. Now if I type in 50%, this happens, which is clearly not what I want, because I only want to transform the pattern. So these need to be unchecked, and as you can see, then the pattern is kept the same, which is what I'm after. So okay, I'm happy with that. That's me changing the pattern. Now in order to match what I want here, I want the pocket to be a solid black, I want the band at the back of the neck to be blue, and I want the collar to be filled with this well, it's not black, this anthracite grey colour. So first of all, let's do the easy changes. I'm going to go to my pocket. So I'll go to my pocket and I'll select that, and there it is, all white, and I will just click on my anthracite colour swatch, and that has been changed. Same thing, I will select the band at the back of my neck, and I'll pick my blue duffel bag tone that I wanted from before, So that's changed that. Now the collar, well, that's different, because if you actually look, the collar is filled with a pattern. If I double click on it, you know, here's the pattern swatch that's come in. Now with this pattern swatch, this has been created, if I just turn it to 1 by 1, this has been created with a clipping mask as it's been added to this, as it says when I want to edit this. So in order to change this, first of all, I need to get rid of that. So I'm selecting everything. I'm going to Object, Clipping Mask, and I'm going to release it. There you see I have my original artwork. So this box, I want to change the fill color of this from being white to fill the pattern, right? So what I need to do is select over that, and I will make my clipping mask again, right? So I'll go make, there we go. Now I'll change it to my 5 by 5 grid, and you can see that, and you think, oh, well, that's not quite right at the moment, because I need this to be a solid, and I've got these lines through it. So I'm clicking here on my my box here, and I'm just going to extend it so that it now creates a solid fill color, right, which is what I'm after. So I will OK that, and then if I zoom back out, you'll see, because I've already amended the pattern, it's changed already. So the pattern has been already altered. Now there's a difference between the collar pattern here and the collar pattern there, and again, that's potentially as a result of the scaling. So to make sure I get these scales right, I can click on this, and I can go to transform, and I can scale it again, and in this instance, instead of going down, I'll increase it. 200 was probably wrong, I'm not too sure what my settings were. There we go, 180. So there you go, I can adjust my pattern sizes by scaling it, and that is how I can recolor my artwork and redraw my my pencil work. So that's by modifying my lines and my patterns and adding a color and a pattern to my fashion sketch. So I again hope you found this tutorial useful, and should you have any questions, just let me know.